Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be looking at your temperature anomalies and your precipitation forecast over the next 7 days. It's a bit of a different upload. We're not going to really be talking about what's happening right now because there isn't a lot happening right now, but we're actually going to be looking a bit farther out to see what's going to happen over the next couple of days. And we're going to be using the European model for this forecast. Now, we're going to start off here at the National Weather Service, where you have frost advisories in effect for parts of Northern California, especially some of those higher elevations, and then also in through Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois, Iowa, and then even one county in Missouri under frost advisories. And then we have flood warnings in effect in those greens right across some rivers over the Midwest, air quality alerts over parts of anywhere from Arkansas to parts of North Carolina, and then we have red flag warnings in effect for Wyoming and Colorado, and then a wind advisory over parts of Montana. Now we're going to be looking at your temperature anomalies from the European model over the next 7 days. So we start off now, we have well below average temperatures over the Midwest, and then some warmer temperatures as you get closer to the East Coast and into parts of the Southwest. Now, as we continue to move on, you see that those warmer temperatures start to build across the east, and those colder temperatures start to really develop over the Midwest, and you'll start to see them move a little bit closer to the East Coast. The East Coast, especially parts of the Northeast and the Mid Atlantic, getting in on some of these below average temperatures now, but the South is still very warm, 10 to 15 degrees below average, and then those colder, really isolated to parts of the Northeast like New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and northward, and those warm temperatures really down in the Southeast and the Southwest pretty much. This below average right here, this is due to some thunderstorm activity that's going to be taking place, actually associated with the next front system that's going to be moving through and impacting parts of the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic throughout the next couple of days. Now, as we move on, see that warm air starting to build, moving a little bit north, but that cold air starting to dip down a little bit right behind this front, and that's going to be leading to some cold air right behind it, some warm air right in front of it, and then a little bit of cold right behind or right in front of this warm front. Now, as we move on, that warm starts to build. That cold really deepens into the deep south, and you're 10 to 15 degrees below average in the deep south by this point. And then as we move on, still 10 to 15 degrees below average. A lot of blues and greens on your screen indicating below average, but then some really warm temperatures over the Rocky Mountains and the west. Now, as we continue to move on, warm air really developing and deepening over the west, and that cold air really intense over the east, 10 to 15 degrees below average, anywhere from northern Florida up through Maine and into Canada. And as we continue on through Friday, it's going to be really cold over these areas. Not really cold, 10 to 15 degrees below average. So maybe some 40s, 30s, 20s in some areas. And as you continue, another front starts to move through the middle part of the country, and that would be over past our forecasting time frame of 7 days. But you see that warm air really starting to build. And I was looking at the full model run, and it had the about 15 to 20 to 30 degrees above average over parts of the east coast as that front started to move through. So, a very deep front. Now, we're going to look at your precipitation from the European model, and we just have some showers right now off of the coast of New Jersey, parts of the Mid-Atlantic, and then the Southeast as well. Now, as we move on, you're starting to see some thunderstorms develop over parts of Louisiana and Texas, and that's going to be associated with some really intense thunderstorms over parts of the Northeast because of this clipper-like system that's going to be forming out of the north, and then some a southeast component, and that's going to kind of merge together, and that's going to lead to some very intense downpours over the Northeast. Now, as we move on, you see that system starting to move out of the north, and now it's in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, and then some really intense thunderstorm activity. This is the little pocket of below average in the southeast that we were showing, and that was the thunderstorm activity right there. And as we continue to move on, you see those really intense thunderstorms starting to build by Wednesday. That front really getting going by Wednesday morning, and you see this big swath of moisture all the way from Texas into parts of southern Canada. and that's going to be all associated with our next front that's going to bring very heavy downpours into the northeast and the mid-Atlantic. As you see, those dark greens indicating over 1 inch per hour of precipitation. And as you continue, you see some wintry mix over there in upstate New York over some higher elevations associated with the Appalachian Mountains. But mainly, for the most part, it's just going to be a rain system. If this was a little bit later, maybe even just 2 or 3 weeks later, you could be seeing some snow over these areas. And actually, the GFS was pointing out some snowfall over parts of Vermont, New Hampshire, and then down into central Pennsylvania. It had it later in the model run, so not too reliable that far out, but definitely we could be seeing some snowfall over these areas over the next couple of weeks. And as it moves out into Canada, just some lingering showers, and then some tropical disturbance over parts of the Gulf, and we're gonna have to definitely watch out for that. That's a tropical disturbance that could definitely form into a hurricane. Just looks like some scattered thunderstorms right now. It would be a late season hurricane. We're midway through October, but it's not unheard of to see a hurricane at this time of the year. And then as we continue to move on, that kind of moves onshore, but then it gets swooped along with your next front, and that's going to be kind of weakening. It doesn't really get across the entire U.S., but you do see some very heavy downpours over Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, and even into Louisiana. And then some snow building over the Rocky Mountains. And one thing I want to point out is that you had a lot of moisture being funneled in quietly over parts of Oregon and Washington. And actually, if I do go back, you do see how almost every time that front passed from the west, got broken up by the mountains. Another pool of moisture came off the Pacific, and you see how it really impacted those areas. Now we're gonna look at your precipitation. We're gonna zoom in area by area. So starting in the northwest, the key is a tenth of an inch to half an inch would be in the greens. In those blues, you're about half an inch to 1 inch. In those yellows and oranges, you're 1 to 2 inches. In the reds, you're 2 to 5 inches. And then if you're in a brown, you're 5 to 7 inches, and then 7+ inches in those whites, purples, or even pinks. Now you see over right here, this is a mountain range right here. So you see a sharp cutoff in your precipitation amounts. So right before there, the thunderstorms really got broken up by that mountain range. But you see a lot of precipitation right in front of those mountains, about 5 inches in most areas, actually widespread throughout the next 7 days. Now we're gonna look at your snowfall here, because there are actually a lot of mountains over these areas that we're actually seeing that precipitation in the form of snowfall. So yeah, you see these higher elevations seeing snowfall right in this area, and that's about 6+ inches of snowfall in some areas. Now we're going to look at the southwest. Not really a lot to talk about. Once you get closer to Texas and the south central United States, that's where you start to see those rainfall amounts right around 2 to 5 inches. Some areas in Louisiana seeing about 7 to 8 inches of rainfall. The exact location of that is not too certain, but definitely somewhere between Louisiana, Mississippi, Texas. Could definitely see a lot of rainfall. Now we're going to move into the Midwest, where you could be seeing about tenth of an inch to 2 inches at most. The Great Lakes look to get about tenth of an inch in some areas. Some areas not even picking that much rainfall, up less than a tenth of an inch over this little area in the gray, and then this area as well. But most areas seeing at least a tenth of an inch over the next 7 days. But it's gonna be pretty dry over these areas. Now into the southeast, where it's definitely not dry. Places in Florida seeing over 10 inches. That's due to that tropical disturbance that would be forming and impacting these areas. Again, the exact track isn't certain. We don't know if it's going to develop. The European model wants to develop this, and we'll have to see what the other models actually want to do with this system. But widespread, you're saying over 2 inches, 2 to 5 inches widespread. Actually, a lot of isolated areas seeing over 5 inches. And then finally into the northeast, where you're seeing about widespread 2 to 5 inches, and then some areas in upstate New York seeing over 5 inches, 5.5 inches in some areas. Now, thank you for watching that video. Really thank you for watching that. please consider subscribing to the channel, turning on notifications, and liking the video. Really appreciate it, and definitely helps the channel. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. That was Eli the Weather Guy, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.